Okay, so I have 10 o'clock. Can everyone hear me?
I can.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you. Sherry, can you please start the recording? I tried to. Oh, I'm sorry. Duh. All right. So it's 10 o'clock. Thank you all very much for joining us for today's discussion of the KCTCS Essential Standards, or the KES, as well as the new regular and substantive interaction, or RSI, policy. This meeting is just a quick kickoff to a self-paced training in Blackboard that will be opening up next week. And that training is going to give everyone some practice with the KES. It will help you to evaluate how your own courses currently stack up to the KES. And it'll give you an opportunity to discuss all of these standards with other faculty members and kind of see how other people are approaching the standards and how they meet that criteria. That training is also going to give you an opportunity to learn more about the federal government's recent policy on regular and substantive interaction, which is something that is coming down the pike very soon. And Sherry and I will be in touch with everyone about that as the final details get ironed out here in the next week or so. For today's presentation, we're just introducing KES and RSI in a broad way to prepare you for what you will see when we open up the training. We've set aside an hour for this kickoff, though I don't actually think it'll take that long. Basically, we're just going to talk about the history behind this initiative, take a look at what the KES are and how we'll be using them. And we're going to end with a discussion of RSI and how that applies to online courses, after which Sherry will give you a brief overview of the structure of the online training. We're going to keep things pretty broad to make sure we have plenty of time for any questions that you may have as we go along. But let's start with the essential standards. By now, many of you have probably already heard about or read about at least something related to the KES. But just in case you haven't, let's start by talking about how we got here with the KES and where all of this came from. So back in 2019, the KCTCS President's Leadership Team put together a cross-system work group, the purpose of which was to propose a quality assurance process that was going to be focused on improving the consistency of the student experience in online classes. What they had noticed was that there was a lack of common standards across the system, and this was leading to some pretty wide variations in student learning experiences from different colleges, right? So it was decided that an agreed upon set of quality principles and minimum expectations for online instruction would be beneficial. As a result, you had representatives from all 16 colleges in KCTCS meet as a work group, and they recommended that the Blackboard exemplary course rubric be used in its entirety as a quality review rubric for all online courses. And this recommendation was adopted by the online learning peer team in spring 2020, and Sky moved to the ECP rubric the next semester in fall 2020 for our QA process. More recently, the KCTCS Board of Regents Resource Optimization Committee was reviewing data related to online learner success, and they made recommendations to the board about coming up with a specific plan to better assess online course quality and to improve outcomes for KCTCS students. And based on those recommendations, the Board of Regents is requiring that all KCTCS colleges implement a process to ensure that we have consistency in our online course offerings, and that there's a quality assurance process in place. And this requirement includes an assessment of how well our online courses meet the KCTCS essential standards, or the KES. Also, as part of that, all faculty, full-time and part-time, are required to be trained in applying the essential standards, which is what brought us here today. So that being said, what are the KES? Simply put, they're just a subset of the ECP rubric. It's just a part of the rubric that we've already been using every semester for 3 years now. In this case, the KES are comprised of 21 standards on that rubric. You have the 14 compulsory standards. Those are the ones that are worth 5 points. Those are the ones that if you submit your course to Blackboard, to their exemplary course program, if you want them to review it to see if you can get exemplary status, you have to pass all 14 of those criteria and hit 85% to achieve exemplary status. So the KES are those 14 compulsory standards, and they are also the 7 standards related to accessibility. So you're going to learn more about each of the 21 KES as you go through the training site in Blackboard. So I'm not going to go through all of them here. I would like to take just a moment to say something specifically about standard 1.1 and goals and objectives, because it ties in a bit with standard 1.8 and because it ties into several of the standards on the full ECP rubric, which is obviously what we use here locally for QA. And this is also a standard that I think really benefits from a bit of additional explanation, because there's kind of a lot going on in 1.1. And I know that, so my camera is disabled, so I can't show you, but on the rubric, 1.1 says, goals and objectives are clearly written, appropriate for the course level, and aligned to desired outcomes. And what I want to do with that standard is highlight the distinction between learning objectives and goals or course competencies. And it can get a little bit confusing because people will use those terms interchangeably. And you see that even in the literature, that people swap these terms back and forth. And they're pretty easy to confuse because they are closely related to one another. For our purposes, though, we want to have a clear delineation between an objective and a competency or a goal. So at the beginning of the semester, we all get our syllabus template and we put in our course competencies. And if you're following the Blackboard template, you also copy those competencies over into your Blackboard shell. However, that's not the end of the story. You will also need to include lesson level or module level learning objectives that demonstrate how you are meeting those competencies. So for our purposes, we can kind of think about it like this. A competency or the competencies are the main ideas or the skills that you expect students to master. These are the things that the learner will be able to do by the end of your course. So these are going to be much broader than a lesson learning objective. The learning objectives are these specific abilities or skills that a student is going to need to know in order to reach that course competency. And these show what a student will be able to do at the end of a unit, lesson, or module of instruction. So the SLOs, or the student learning objectives, build towards the competencies. You can kind of think of those as the prerequisite skills that a student needs to reach or accomplish in order to reach that competency. Typically, I mean, you could have anywhere from 2 to 10 learning objectives or more in any module, unit, or lesson, just kind of depending on a range of factors, how many you might have. But you would have several learning objectives in each module, unit, or lesson, and those would be aligned with the course competencies. So in order to meet standard 1.1, you need to have learning objectives present, and as stated in that standard and alluded to in 1.8, they need to be aligned to your competencies and instructional strategies. So it's going to be important for that one just to demonstrate how your instructional materials and your assessments successfully align with the learning objectives. What that means is when we talk about alignment, that means that your materials and your assessments actually measure what you say they measure in the learning objective. So if your learning objective says that a student will be able to analyze something or describe something, but your only assessment is a multiple choice quiz, we would say that the objective and the assessment are not aligned. A multiple choice quiz does not measure how well a student can describe or analyze something. It might show that they can identify or recognize or recall something, but it wouldn't really work to show an analytical skill or show a description of something. But that's really what 1.1 is getting at, and that's why I wanted to highlight it as a common trouble area for a lot of people on the rubric. So as you're going through lesson 1 on course design, just kind of think about how you will meet those standards or how you currently meet the standard, and you'll see discussion, more discussion of that standard and all of the others. So I'm not going to belabor any of that here. As you go through those 21 keys, you'll see that they cover a lot of different areas, like course design, chunking of content, learner engagement, assessment of student learning and interaction, and learner support. You'll also find that several of these are met just by following the Blackboard template or by using tools that are present in Ultra. But overall, I think everyone here is in a really good position to meet the keys without any trouble, because that's really all it is. It's just part of the rubric that we have been using for years. With all that said, one of the big questions is, how does this impact what we'll be doing here as far as quality assurance process? And the answer really is it doesn't affect us that much. At this point, pretty much everyone here has been through the QA process in the last 3 years since we adopted the ECP rubric. So the QA procedure will continue pretty much the same as it always has. And, we've said that an instructor under review must score a minimum of 85% in order to pass, and that is going to be unchanged. The only new aspect of this that's going to be added to the QA starting in the fall is that anyone under review also has to meet all 21 of those standards. But practically speaking, this doesn't affect us too much because if you're hitting the 85% mark, you're going to be meeting most, if not all, of the KES standards anyway. So long story short, this won't have much impact on our internal processes here. And we've actually been pretty fortunate in that regard because heading into this process, there were multiple colleges around the system that didn't have a process in place and hadn't even started looking into the ECP rubric. So we've been pretty far ahead of most of the other colleges, and that's really made this KES transition a lot smoother here than it has been in other places. And that's really all I have to say about the background of the KES. Does anyone have any questions before we talk about RSI? All right, so the last thing I want to talk about here is the idea of regular and substantive interaction in online courses, or RSI. First, as far as the background of this idea and why we're doing it now, back in 2017, the Department of Education reviewed courses at Western Governors University, and their audit showed that WGU was providing correspondence education rather than distance education. And they ruled that only institutions which provided regular and substantive interaction between students and faculty members could be considered as providing distance education. And this regulation is important because that impacts an institution's access to federal financial aid. And in this case, WGU was originally asked to reimburse over $700 million in federal financial aid. So the stakes of following RSI are very high in the event that a school is audited. And it can have serious ramifications for federal financial aid and an institution's ability to offer federal aid. In 2019, the DOE backtracked and said that WGU didn't owe them reimbursement because the regulation for RSI was too ambiguous and that more clarification was needed from the Department of Education. Now, so there were issues before the Western Governors University case, but this was the most recent catalyst which spurred the Education Department to issue new guidance for what it considers RSI. And effective July 1st, 2021, the DOE put out information for what that means and what they're looking for. And it's still not exactly the clearest thing that you're ever going to read, but it does provide at least a framework for us to approach the issue. And RSI boils down to the idea that interaction in the course should be basically three things. It needs to be initiated by the instructor. It needs to be frequent and consistent throughout the semester, and it needs to be substantively focused on the course subject and help contribute to student accomplishment of the learning objectives. So what does all that mean? Well, when we talk about substantive interaction, we're looking at how the instructor engages students with teaching, learning, and assessment of course content, and how well that content successfully meets course competencies and objectives. And there are several ways that the Education Department has said this can be accomplished. For example, they say that providing specific feedback on student work would be an example. As long as the feedback either gives suggestions for improvement, reinforces or advances course content, or successfully helps them meet the learning objectives. So having an automatically graded assignment that only indicates right or wrong answers would not be consistent with this. But if you have a paper or discussion board in which you are giving them specific feedback for how to improve, or you're adding on to what the student has said, that would be an example of specific feedback. The standard can be met via direct instruction, which might be participating in class discussion boards, so posting follow-up questions, helping students engage with the material in a deeper way. This could be hosting synchronous online meetings or facilitating group discussions. It could be posting guiding questions for readings or things like that. In terms of what regular interaction means, the idea is that it must be instructor initiated and must occur frequently throughout the term. So much so that students can come to expect it. Sending out weekly announcements to say, I want you to read this chapter and remember the due date for the quiz. That's good for establishing instructor presence and regular interaction, but it would not be enough by itself to be considered substantive. The interactions need to be focused on content and objectives. So, reviewing difficult course material or providing extra instruction about the subject would be considered substantive. That also means, deadlines and assignments are spread throughout the term so that students regularly receive feedback and they regularly have that interaction with the instructor, which also ties in with standard 3.5 in the KES. So some of these are mutually reinforcing. So when you think about RSI, these are all things to think about in terms of the delivery of the course. The KES seek to address elements of course design, those things that happen before the semester begins. But RSI is more about how the class is being delivered on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. And RSI is something that the Quality Assurance Committee will be discussing and possibly incorporating in some way into its future reviews, but that's a conversation that we'll be having over the next few weeks. Right now, the system is working with the online peer team to finalize a formal KCTCS policy around how we're going to ensure compliance with DOE standards, and we'll have final language on that very soon. For this training, as you're going through it, you're going to see some discussion of what it means to provide substantive interaction and what constitutes regular interaction during the course. You'll see examples of what does or does not meet those standards. A bit later, Sherry and I will have a training that is specifically focused on RSI, but this training is just kind of a warm-up, and it's going to give you a broad look at what you can expect shortly on that front. Sherry, is there anything you would like to add to that? Oh. Okay. So does anyone have any questions about RSI or? I can see you, I just can't hear you.
Justin, this is Brian Edens. I don't have a question yet about RSI. I'm sure I will before it's all over, but I actually want to go back and ask you something about something you said early on. You said that there were 14 compulsory standards and 7 accessibility standards. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, so does that mean that the 7 accessibility standards are non-compulsory?
So when we talk about compulsory standards, so that is in reference to the Blackboard ECP rubric as a whole. So if you were going to submit your course to Blackboard for them to review it, in terms of the KES standards, the system, the Board of Regents, so those are all 21 are compulsory for our purposes. They all 21 have to be met, in other words.
Okay, so the reason for the differentiation there then seems to be that in order to be considered an exemplary course, it has to meet those particular 14 standards. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Can you hear me?
Hey, Sherry. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm joined by my phone. I don't know what happened. So
that's all right. Did you have anything else you wanted to add about RSI before I turn it over to you?
I just wanted to let everyone know that System Office will be be releasing a policy, we think, in the next week. It is very much like the policy that we were following previously. This one, though, is combined by the 16 colleges. So, but we should have that, and we should be able to sprinkle this through this training, even though we're going to have a bigger one later.
Anything else? Any questions? All right, hearing none, Sherry, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm going to try to do this. All right, so I am actually going to go through the training. Let's see, turn my volume down. Okay. Sorry about the issues. Can everyone still hear me okay?
I can.
All right. Okay, so I am going to give you an overview of the actual training once I share my screen. Can you see that? Can everyone see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right. Okay, so here is the actual training online. The things that you need to know is that this training is for anyone that teaches online. It have gone through the KES. If you've been through the Cool Academy, if you have been through QA since 2021, is that right, Justin? You don't actually go through this training, but it is still suggested to refresh and look at one of your classes. You will choose one class to actually look at and answer these questions as you go through. So here's our course overview, and start here. Of course, you're going to have a course introduction. It's going to be set up quite a bit like your own class, I would hope. But your course competencies, your course tasks, module activities, and each of these modules are going to be set up in a similar fashion. So we're going to put the recording in here for anyone else that joins. If you're here today and you really don't need to go through the KES, you can email me and tell me not to put you in the class, but I'd rather you did. So anyway, so you will work through each of the modules, and you will do them in order. There is progress tracking, as you can see, and then also there will be a sequence order. And let's see, the facilitators, of course, is Justin and myself, and it's got our contact information. I know this is just housekeeping and things, but we just need to have it in here just in case. We wanted to present it like you would to anyone else taking the training. There is the course info, the policies and procedures. To receive credit for completing the workshop itself, you must receive 100% on all the 15 graded activities. We think that each module will take approximately an hour. The two in the middle are smaller and may not take as long. So altogether, we think that it'll take 3 to 4 hours. If you're having issues or don't understand something, of course, call us. Let's see. And then this is your technology requirements and your netiquette and your guide. This is where you will get the KES guide. So this is the Essential Skills Standard guide, the one that we actually go by. And you can download it here. We actually have a few in the office, so if you'd rather have a hard copy, you can either print it for yourself, or we have just a few of the spiral bound KES standards in the office. So just let us know if you want one, and we can put one in the mail, or you can come by and pick one up. Then this is the introduction. Justin went through a lot of this, but still you should go through it. And then this tells you to make sure you have one of the copies of the KES as you go through to look at your course. Each module activity will have a suggested deadline. The actual deadline for the entire course is May 5th. There is a suggested deadline because you will have 15 activities to go through. And so that if you go by that deadline that is in each of the overviews, then you will be on track and you won't have a whole lot to do at the very end, of course. Okay. And here is your category 1 course design. You have a module overview, and each one, and we're still adding some things here. So it'll tell you all of the activities that you need to complete, and then it'll give you the overview. At the end here, you will see the activity that you will need to complete for that specific part. And then here's your goals and objectives. Each one of these it has its own activities, and it has videos, and it has resources for you to look at. And at the bottom, you'll see a question. You will write 2 or 3 sentences of how you achieved that goal, how you know you have achieved the goal. So it is just one question. There is 5 points, and there's one for each of the standards, and sometimes they're combined if they are closely related. Like let's see. In this one, there's a lot of resources for accessibility, ADA, how to do ADA in Word and tables and documents and things like that. There's also videos here, but these are step-by-step resources if you need them, if you see in your course that you're having issues. So there are resources there you can use. You do not need to watch every video, and you can go through and just pick up the parts that you need. And then at the very end of each one of the categories, there is a course discussion, which will be a discussion of you and your peers of how you do it. So y'all can get ideas from each other. Okay. So as I said, it should take approximately 6 weeks to complete if you do it as it's chunked. If not, it has to be done. The course will close on the May 6th. And does anybody have any questions? Are we not getting questions, or am I not hearing them? Oh, okay, in the chat, let me see. If my online course was assessed last semester, should I do this as a review? You can do this as a review. It is not a requirement. It is a good idea, and especially if you only had one course and you teach more than one course, you may want to go through all of it, all of the online portion, and look at your class.
Sherry?
Yes.
This is Bruce. Why is there such a quick turnaround for this? I mean, you're saying it's going to take 6 weeks, and that's barely 6 weeks to complete it.
No, you are given 6 weeks to complete it. So it should take about 3 to 4 hours to complete it. So it's broken down.
Oh, okay. So we're getting
Yeah.
6 weeks to complete the whole thing, but it's not
Yes.
going to take us 6 weeks to do it.
No. It is not. You can go at your own pace, however you need to do it, but there are suggested timelines, but each one of these things should take an hour and sometimes less.
Okay. Now, I checked with Dr. Matthews, and he said that if you did the Cool Academy and you graduated from Cool Academy, you don't have to do this training.
No, you do not.
But is SKYCTC requiring all of us to do it anyway?
Well, at some point you will probably be asked to do it, Justin. There is a timeline. Like there was the gateway courses, and then all faculty by next spring. Is that right?
Yeah, May 2024, all full-time faculty.
Yes. Okay. So
it's
the
better
end of
to
next
go ahead
spring.
and-
So you can go through it now, and it'll count. Or if you've been through Cool Academy, like was said. You don't have to go through it. If you've been through our ECP since 2020, you don't have to do this. There's a few though that may need to do it, even if they have been through our ECP within the last few years and look at another course, because it could be the one picked. So.
Right, yeah, because I did Cool Academy and I'm on quality assurance and I've been through quality assurance training. So I'm like, this just seems like a whole lot of doing the same thing over and over again. Kind of, let's jump through some hoops for people.
Right, and if you went to the KCTCS Essential Skills Training that we had in person with the KCTCS representative, but anyway, if you've been through that, you don't have to do this. It's just a repeat of the same thing, but online, and you'll probably look at your course really close.
Okie dokie, thank you.
Justin, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that pretty much covers everything we had, everything we know at this point.
Yeah. So far,
yeah.
But yeah, we don't have a whole lot of faculty that haven't been through some type of training or been through our ECP, which KES is covered.
Hey, Sherry, how much professional development we're getting out of this?
I think it will be 5 hours, because this counts as 1 hour, and then we probably will count the other as 4. So it's like 5 hours.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Sherry, quick question for you. Is there any chance, I've done the Cool Academy, but if I did this, is there going to be an option maybe to do it over the summer if I wanted to? It's kind of hard to think about adding this in at this point in the semester, to be honest.
Yeah, that's why we spread it out so far. We know people have to work into their schedule, to get this done, and that's kind of why we said 6 weeks kind of thing. But we plan, Justin, we hadn't exactly put down in writing what we were going to do. I think we're going to look at doing another one, but we haven't decided for sure. Because we will have to do an RSI. We know we're going to have to do something about that. And I don't know if we're going to combine it more tightly with this or not.
Yeah, and I know the Board of Regents and the PLT are talking about an expansion of the program, which was on and then it was paused, and then we kind of get conflicting things sometimes. So we're just kind of playing it by ear.
Anybody have any other questions? Stop sharing my screen. I do want to apologize. I think I changed something so Justin could share his camera because evidently I had it turned off. So I would like to apologize for that, for the issues with technology. Okay. Anybody have anything else? Okay, so if you're here in the meeting, I will automatically add you to the content. We are going to open it Wednesday. We have some minor adjustments, and we're going to get some finalization on the RSI and try to get it in here a little bit better. And we should get something back Tuesday. But the final markups of the proposed policy. So that should be done Tuesday, and we'll try to get the other stuff in there Wednesday, and we will add everybody. And then we'll send an announcement once it is open. So if you have done the Cool Academy, or if you have done QA and you don't want to go through the training right now, please let us know that too. We have a lot of other people that will be added to it, but I think it'll be a pretty good experience in the discussions. Anyway, you may get some really good ideas from your colleagues. So anyway, just let us know. Anything else you want to add, Dr. Matthews?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I think we can turn everybody loose, let them enjoy their Friday.
Yeah, right. I wasn't ready. Anyway, okay. All right. If anybody else has questions, just email Dr. Matthews or myself, and we'll get back to you. Okay. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Sherry.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.